My name is Andrew. I'm a Nashville-based recording engineer, musician, mixer, producer, whatever. I moved to LA when I was 20 years old to go to a recording trade school, which was actually awesome. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. And then I got hired right on staff at East West Recording Studios in Hollywood, where I worked for over 5 years with artists such as Weezer, John Legend, Dawes, Ghost BC, Sum 41, James Blake. Amazing producers and a bunch of amazing engineers. I worked as a staff engineer, so I got to basically see how different music was made every single day. The recording process, the production process, the collaborative process of teams and everything like that. And so today we're going to do a little reflecting, and I'm going to share 5 mistakes that nearly killed my audio engineering career. The first thing is giving way too much credit to the audio engineering process. Here's a perfect example. When I was a teenager and recording my bands and basically didn't know anything technically about what I was doing, I thought the way that you got the results you wanted from a song was by mixing, because the things didn't sound how I wanted them to sound when we recorded them. So I thought, man, you just need a really great mixer and you really need to learn how to mix to get your songs to sound great. Now that line of thinking was just because I didn't have the experience of how records were made. I didn't even understand what a producer was. I didn't understand the value of songwriting and how important every single aspect of the song is, and the marriage of the songwriting and the production being put together well, plus the capture. But the truth is, a great record needs all of it. Killer songwriting, great production, and great audio engineering. Number 2, thinking that I could do everything exactly on my own. Because of course, I can do everything on my own. I'll save money. I'll sharpen my strengths at doing all of those individual things. I'll be more resourceful, and it'll turn out just as good as if there was a team. Right? Now this goes to anyone working in music, and honestly anything in business as well. An individual is not going to outwork a team. It's just not going to happen, especially if that team has a bunch of qualified, skilled, I call them killers, on that team. You're just never gonna outwork them. Everyone is doing their own role and focusing on that. My mistake was thinking that I could do it all. Engineer, produce, mix, play, do everything, save cash. And honestly, it's a big mistake. There are certain circumstances where you just have to do everything because you're just getting started. It's usually when that happens. But as your career is developing and you're doing better work, you have to bring in other people onto that team because you want your focus fixated on the thing that you're there to do, and likewise for everyone else on the team. Here's a great example. If I'm recording a vocalist and I'm wearing the audio engineer hat, I'm sitting at the desk and I'm focusing super hard on 4 or 5 things. Number 1, I'm focusing on the sound. Is this signal coming in good? Does it feel like it's matching the voice that's coming in? I'm focusing on the signal path, like the compression. Is the compression nice on the vocals? I'm focusing on the input level. Gosh, is that gonna get too hot if they get loud, or is it not loud enough? Do I need to bring the output up a little bit? I'm also focusing on the takes that we're getting. Not the performance, but the literal where we are in the song, and labeling the takes so that we can do comps easily after we get the takes. I'm also focusing on the track labels and being able to fly tracks in between where they are on the recording track and where they need to be. I'm also focusing on the headphone mix for the performer. But you know what I'm not focusing on? The performance they're giving me. Occasionally you notice, you're like, oh, that was pretty good. But the audio engineer is to do those things. The producer is to be right there communicating with the vocalist on the performance that they're giving and having that objective judgment, not paying attention to anything I'm paying attention to. They're paying attention to the emotion and the delivery. Having a team where each person has that dedicated focus, you're gonna get the absolute best results. So then when you do go to get the comp, it's very easy and the producer knows we have everything that we need in the take. Mistake number 3 is focusing way too much on just the audio engineering and ignoring the actual part and production. Now this is really common when you're getting started and even in the first few years, because you're trying to overcome some technical ignorance. You're trying to get better at getting sounds if you're really focused on being an audio engineer. So I hyper fixated on how do you get that sound, what compressor and what compressors, you know, in what order and how much. Like I would focus so much on the signal path of the recording that I completely missed the big picture of the production and the value of getting the right part, because I was so focused on that snare sound or that vocal sound or that guitar sound or drum room sound or whatever. I wanted to know how to get the sounds that I missed the value of like paying attention to the actual part. And all the lessons that I've learned as an audio engineer, unfortunately I've learned the hard way. And a great example for this mistake is like I was working on a mix and there were drums and bass and guitar, and it was a kind of a band arrangement, and I was just trying to get this bass to sit. And I remember like really having a problem with it in a specific section of the song. So in hindsight, it seems pretty obvious, but I was just messing around with the compressor and the EQ and the level and this and that, and I just wasn't getting it to work right. And then at some point I just zoomed in to the part on the bass, and I could visually see that the bass was out of sync with the drum part, just ever so slightly. It was creating a rub. I just sliced it up, linked it up with the drums, and all of a sudden the bass just sat perfectly in the song. So even if you're the audio engineer, it is so important to also try to be locked in on the production and the part, because you are participating in that, and later it's going to bite you in the butt on the mix if you don't get the right part for the song. Now I will say this is more of a producer's job, but as an engineer it is good to do this, which leads me into mistake number 4. Okay, so number 4 is not stepping into production. So this mistake sort of blossomed because once I started working with top tier level teams at East West, and there were producers and assistants and editors and all these different people on the team, I really just focused on staying in my lane as the engineer, meaning that I don't give out my opinions, I don't give feedback on takes and things like that, because that was essentially my role. But after I left and then started working on other projects, not every project has a team like that. And when it is missing the role of the producer, sometimes you're really hurting yourself by just sticking to your lane. Let's use indie projects as an example. The artist has something in their head that they understand and that they want to get out in the song, but they aren't necessarily sure if they're getting it out while they're in front of the mic, and they need that feedback and they need that guidance. And if I'm sitting in the audio engineer's chair and I'm essentially refusing to give feedback because I'm like, no, that's not my job. My job is to just engineer and make sure that their headphones are cool and this and that, I'm hurting the overall production and the song, especially if I'm mixing it later. It is in my own interest to get the best possible take. And so essentially what I would do, and I did this for a very short amount of time, because essentially I wound up mixing and being like, why didn't I give some feedback here? What I would do is, you know, I would be recording the vocalist and they would ask, you know, how was that? And I would just give them some technical answer. Like it was almost like a bit, you know, oh, how was that take? I'm like, oh, you know, that microphone is a perfect fit for your voice. Sounds amazing. How's it sound in your headphones? Just giving non-performance related feedback, and really that it would have sped things up to actually give an opinion on that and say, well, you know, I think it was really good, but these 2 words here, I think we're out of time or off pitch or a little bit. Let's just grab that or something like that, because that can actually move the session along faster. And another consideration is like, these are projects you're putting your name on. You want them to do well and you want to be proud of them and show them to other people. And if you're just sticking to your lane as an audio engineer and you're not willing to, you know, be vulnerable, give those opinions on the production, then you're not going to want to show these to people later. And I'll tell you what, I've got a lot of stuff I've worked on that I don't want to show people because of that. So that was a big mistake. Okay, number 5 is chasing sounds that I like versus what's right for the song. As a musician and just a lover of music, there are sounds that you hear on records that you just love, and you know, when you start to get into the music production and in engineering, you want to figure out how to get those sounds. And I took that to like too far, which is there were sounds that I loved that I basically wanted to get 100% of the time. And this was a mistake because not one sound works on 100% of music that you listen to. I actually did a session with my wife years ago at East West where we hired session musicians, And I made this mistake where I wanted the drums to sound a way that I thought was so awesome. I also just wanted to have a record where I engineered and mixed and got those sounds on them. So I directed the drummer to tune the drums a certain way and bring certain drums, and we recorded it, and it did that sound. I got that sound that I absolutely love. And the performances, everything was great. However, in the mix later on, when we weren't there, I just felt like I was fighting the sounds that we got. Like, man, it's just like, it's not communicating the emotion of this song. I don't know what it is. And I eventually realized, like, oh, it's because I got like Fleetwood Mac drum sounds, and this is like a high energy sounding song, and this is not, these things don't match together, and there's really nothing I can do outside of re-record the drums. So this mistake does both fall in the category of engineering and making choices, but also production choices. And it is important, if you are an engineer, to like also understand the greater context of the song and make sure that the choices you're making are in benefit of the actual song you're working on, not just the thing that you like. Because what you don't want to do is have paid for this whole session and everyone who was on it and got it and then realize, like, this could have been a lot better had we used a snare that was tuned up a little bit higher. So those are 5 mistakes that I have learned a lot from and have totally changed in how I approach the sessions that I work on, and you should as well. I wanted to add another lesson in here. This is not necessarily a mistake, but this is something that I could have done a lot better at, especially when I was in Los Angeles and I was working on higher profile sessions, which was, I was just pretty shy. I didn't feel super comfortable, participating in a lot of conversations and going out on a limb on ideas or opinions now. And some of that is warranted. There is sort of a level of, like, if your job is the studio engineer, then that's your job not to give opinions. But I will say I just wasn't super good at being conversational or talking in general. Now I would just say I sucked at talking. Back then I sort of categorized it and rationalized it as, I'm like, oh, I'm just being professional and keeping my mouth shut. But after I left LA, I did a stint in Vegas, and I basically gave up my whole network in Los Angeles that I had built doing all those sessions to start over to basically try and build my own career as Andrew Masters. While I did that, I basically went back down to nothing and got a job teaching recording, and then I also did random gigs that were like, oh, so embarrassingly cheap, like I don't ever want to even tell you. And then the third was I did door-to-door sales. This is the big takeaway. Door-to-door sales sounds terrifying, and it is, and it was, but doing it was probably the greatest thing that I could have done for all future career paths, because what it does is it teaches you to talk to literally anyone. You are the pest who's knocking on the door, and you just gotta charm them and get their attention right away and make them like you really fast and enjoy hanging out with you and trust you. And as hard as that was, I mean, you just get denied over and over and over and over. Knock on the door, denied, if they even answered. The thing that I took away from that is I really wish I would have done something like that sooner, even before I went to LA. So because that would have given me a lot more confidence going into any other job out there, and I probably could have made a lot more from the network of people who I was working with at the time. I worked really hard at my job, but I did not work at getting things beyond that job. Had I had more confidence and skills, just being able to talk to people and being more confident in myself, selling myself, like, I'm qualified, but I was sort of ashamed to say it, and I felt insecure about, like, oh, I don't want to be too salesy, and I don't want to push myself super hard. Well, if that's how you think, then you're not gonna get clients. Like, you have to be able to communicate to the client that you are worth the investment of them paying you and hiring you to handle their most precious thing, and also just like being fun to be around. Because not only are they paying you to have major control of this thing that is their future baby, but also, like, they're spending time with you while they're making it, and they got to enjoy that time. So I would just say, like, something that I wish I would have gotten better at sooner was just being able to talk and being able to confidently talk to whoever it is, and not just talk about myself, but talk to them, learn about the song, learn about their story, and just be able to connect. Because if you can do that, that will probably be the biggest gain that you can have. The one thing, and I tell people who intern with me this, is I would rather hire someone who knows how to be a professional and knows how to hang on a session, who's completely technically unqualified, than hire someone who's overly qualified technically, but has no concept of how to be a person in the room and how to talk and when and why and what to look for. Like, you can teach the technical side of things, but it's really difficult to teach someone how to be professional on a session and in a room. The professional thing I had from that job, but I wish I had more of the confidence in speaking and like becoming friends with the clients without it being like weird. And door-to-door sales, hilariously, was the greatest thing that could have happened, and honestly gave me a huge amount of confidence to start this channel, even though all my early videos were horrifying and I had no idea what I was doing. But give me just enough confidence to just talking to this lens right now, you know? I know you're watching, but I'm looking at a lens. So communication skills, massively important. Hopefully you got some value from these things. I hope that you implement them, think about them, try to consider them when you're working on sessions, not to get too married to the microphone or the signal or the gear or the plugin or whatever. Pay attention to the song. Pay attention to the client. Prepare, over-prepare. The session should be fun, and it can be fun if you're over-prepared and things are ready and you've thought about like every possible scenario. It'll be fun. And if you want more stuff like this, let me know down in the comments. Hit the like button, subscribe to the channel. And the last thing I'll say is I'm working on a video course that's going to go over recording epic drum sounds. No matter where you are, what studio, what you have available, this is going to be a principle-based course teaching you a process on how to get the sounds that you want, how to think about it, what you can implement every time you're doing it. There's going to be a lot of tangible examples, visual, audio examples. There's going to be sessions and things like that all available on the course. I'm really excited about it, and if you're early in your recording experience and career, click that link in the description to pre-sign up for the course or the waitlist, the drum recording waitlist, whatever it says down there. And when it's ready to be launched, I will shoot you an email and probably a discount for anyone who's on that waitlist ahead of time. So go join that waitlist if that sounds interesting to you. Lastly, I want to thank Sweetwater for sponsoring these videos. Starting today on sweetwater.com is software month, which means you can go get some of the best deals on plugins that you can get. And I will say often, if you just peruse Sweetwater for plugins and software, you can find better deals for plugin bundles and different packages that you can't find anywhere else. I'll link some of the plugins that I absolutely must have when I'm working down in the description. Let me know some of the lessons that you've learned so far and some of the things you're trying to learn down below, and I will reply to your comment. See you in the next one.